Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Jess, I feel terrible because I obviously got an email from you saying that was it fractured your wrist over the
Yeah, a
weekend?
gardening accident. I'm keeping it out of shot because it's
Oh, well,
not attractive.
oh, thank you so much for coming anyway, because I
Oh,
obviously
not at
I gave you an opt-out clause because you might be sort of crawling your way over to the camera with your one arm.
all.
Um,
Absolutely fine. Thank you for inviting me.
so Jess is, as I said earlier, from Osbornes.
That's right.
And you've also been presumably working from home for the last however many weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
We've had a comment saying you're looking stunning, Jess. So you and your fractured arm look great. Thanks, Shaylee. Um, but how have things been for you day to day since you've been working at home?
It's actually been fine. I did at the start have a few anxieties about how it was going to work. I'm only 3 weeks into the second week of my training contract, um, and I was just getting to know the team, and I was in an area before I hadn't worked in before. I've worked in finance in the sense I've done finance, divorce and finance. I was going through a tech, which is just a completely different kettle of fish, as
Mm.
I'm sure you know. And so coming home and not having the people around me and not learning from the people around me, that was my initial stuff. But actually, it forced me into self-teaching a little bit, actually doing some really learning, teaching myself about how these cases work.
Mm.
So it's actually been fine, and I've been hugely supported by my advisor Bridget Thompson, who's our department. So yeah, it's actually been okay.
Yeah, I think once we're in practice, it's obviously as barristers we were only pupils for practicing pupils for 6 months, and then people were sort of like, oh, off you go, work it out yourself. So you
Yeah,
never actually get the space to learn a lot of the things that you end up needing to learn.
of
So no, I
course.
agree. There's a lot of time right now to watch a million webinars that all the firms seem to be putting online.
That's it, and that's actually really helpful in terms of guidance, in terms of changes in the law that happen all the time for people to be applying. So yeah, I mean the profession generally is doing an awful lot to support people like me who are just at the start of their career trajectory.
Mm.
So yeah.
I'm sorry, Jess, I can't remember what stage of your training contract you're at.
So I'm in my second seat. So I'm
Right.
nearly halfway through my second seat. My first seat was in litigation, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm in a care, well, mainly care. What I'm doing at a view to then doing another 6 months of divorce and family law.
Mm-hmm. And how has your relationship been with Bridget since you've been at home? And how has yours and Bridget's relationships been with clients? How has that completely transformed digitally?
It's been really good. As I said a moment ago, I felt really supported by Bridget. Not only is she the head of the department, but she's also training principal, and she's my supervisor. So she's got lots of different hats on, which is great in terms of my personal and professional development. And she has, so we've been checking in via email daily, what's going. Our cases are extremely reactive.
Mm.
So we have to be in touch all the time. And then we get on the phone to each other if it warrants it, a long call that we can't stress over email. We probably do that today, but mainly on. She's always there for any questions that I need. Likewise with the rest of the department. I've had a lot of texts and emails from solicitors in the team who have said they feel into a new department where I was 3 weeks in, and then I had to move. So they've been really supportive and said, if I need any help at all, please go to them. If I need any guidance, then please approach them. So I've felt supported by absolutely everybody in the team. It's really good.
Mm. And in terms of the workload in the care department, so
Yeah.
are there any particular patterns you're noticing which are COVID related? Because I've certainly found issues around contact, or issues around one parent abiding by one set of guidance and the other not.
Yeah.
So what kind of things are you seeing within your practice?
In terms of it being COVID related, I haven't noticed that specifically. What I have just how reactive the work is. I mean, I've been working on cases which are similar to you, to contacts, ranging to cases that are involving isolation.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a huge range of work. In terms of COVID, though, I haven't had a huge impact, a huge spike in domestic violence cases. But me,
Yeah.
I haven't worked on a huge amount of cases. The type of work I'm doing at the moment, a lot of care orders and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Mm. And Lucy spoke earlier, just I don't know if you managed to watch Lucy's
Yes, I
interview.
did. Yeah.
Yeah. So she spoke about feeling that feeling anxious that you're not having all the opportunities to prove yourself that you normally would during a training contract. Because it's constantly, how can I impress? How can I impress? How can I impress? Do you share any of those concerns?
I do, but I also think we are now all in the same boat, and
Mm.
everybody is going to be feeling the same. And there's nothing that's good about it. We can, we can prove ourselves in other ways. We can prove ourselves in, small things like the way we prepare, or the way we write a letter, or the way we report back to the client in an advice letter after we've been at court, and the next steps. And we can show that we can be pragmatic in the work that we produce, and show ourselves in those. I mean, yes, we're not, we can't prove ourselves in a meeting with our supervisor, and they can't see us handling it that way. But equally, we're learning to communicate remotely. So I've been involved in conferences on Zoom, for example, with counsel, with Bridget, with clients, and with an interpreter. And we're learning to interact in new ways, like you and I now. So there are other ways of proving yourself. And yes, it's the initial anxiety, but I just thought if I hang on to that, it's going to cause me a lot of turmoil. So I need to let that go.
Well, I'd be interested to know how you found the process of having a con with your client and the interpreter, because I had a hearing this week where it was just all around chaos, trying to get my instructing solicitor, my client, the interpreter on Zoom, the court on the phone, feedback everywhere. I don't know what your experience has been of the quality of client care that you and Bridget have been able to provide, because you're not able to see your clients face to face anymore.
Of course. In terms of client care, I'm picking up the phone all the time and giving clients the reassurance that we are there. As you'll know, in care work, clients are often very vulnerable and they feel supported. So picking up the phone is really, really important. In terms of communication with interpreters, etc., via Zoom, initially there are a few teething problems, just with practically how that's going to work. But we've got an interpreter, which really, really helps from my experience. But also, once we found a system, it kind of works seamlessly. So, for example, we've actually been involved a case that's gone to trial, but it's actually been adjourned and then appealed, and it's all in the at the moment. And in terms of how that practically worked at the hearing, our interpreter was interpreting throughout the hearing, so counsel had to stop after every couple of sentences or every couple of words even to allow the interpreter to interpret it throughout our clients, which did work fine, but it did obviously mean that the amount of time of the hearing doubled essentially. So that's worked okay, best it can. But what we've also done as well with interpreters is we've spoken, we've had the interpreter on the telephone. So we've had the interpreter attend the hearing with the client at the other end of a second telephone, essentially. So the interpreter dialed into the hearing and the client is being interpreted to on the telephone. So I know it's a bit complicated, but that's the other way that we've managed it. So the interpreter is talking over the judge or counsel or whatever. So, it's worked in different ways. Obviously, there's going to be glitches. We're just doing the best that we can. So, how have you found it?
I've had, how many hearings have I had? I think I've had maybe 3 since lockdown began, a couple of advocates meetings. The ones where all the advocates were agreed, and we didn't really have much to discuss because we'd had a really lengthy pre-hearing that was all fine. But the one where, the most recent one, I turned up and there were all sorts of issues because the hearing wasn't what I had thought the hearing would be. And there had been general issues with my client being quite vulnerable. It's not something I'd welcome as the new normal. I'd certainly say that.
Yeah, I completely agree. But we can only do what we do at the moment, can't we?
Yeah,
Be the best
I
we
think
can.
I
Yeah,
think there's a lot to be said for using this for case management hearings, for directions hearings, when it's very, very, very straightforward.
yeah,
But anything more than that, I think there's a real risk of marginalising our clients, and
that's exactly.
particularly in care cases where there are lots of issues with, digital literacy, access to phones,
Exactly.
computers. I think there would be some real problems there.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. And having, we've got one very vulnerable client at the moment who we're trying to organise an intermediary for to attend court with her. But of course, she has to have an assessment, and is have an assessment done remotely, but she doesn't have that access. So now we're desperately trying to get an intermediary sorted, but it, it, it's difficult. So we may have to go back to court to get another direction. And yeah, I mean, in terms of case management and how cases are being run in court, there's obviously still teething issues, which I mean may or may not be ironed out, but we're all doing what we can.
We had a question a few weeks ago when I was interviewing a barrister, and someone asked, what can solicitors do to make your life easier? So in reverse, what could counsel do to make your lives a little bit easier? Is there anything we can do to ease the way or improve that working relationship somehow?
Oh, that's a very tough question. Do you mean in terms of day to day, or do you mean in terms of hearings?
Both.
Oh, that's difficult. That's a difficult one because my experience has been very, very, very positive. What I've from working remotely is actually accounts that we've instructed have ended up going beyond what they probably would have normally to enable us to work efficiently. So, for example, not council specifically necessarily, but the clerks are going above and beyond to make sure that Zoom set up or Skype for business or whatever means we want to communicate by, that all of those details are circulated efficiently and to make sure that they're always on board with this. I'm noticing that there's a lot more back and forth in terms of emails from council. There's a lot more onliner emails, whereas the norm that I had been used to was preparing a brief, and then if council had any questions, they'd come back and ask the questions, and it would all be a bit more kind of formal. But now there's a bit more kind of back and forth, just because that's how we're being forced into communicating.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of a blurring of the roles, because everyone is just trying their best to kind of come together and do what we possibly can with minimal chaos, and it's not always going to work brilliantly, but there we are. So in terms of the support your firm's put in place for you, what have you found really helpful?
Two things. So practically speaking, we've been set up with two screens, straight away. Got sent out to double screen, so we've got a double screen, and that's essentially how we work in the office with two screens. So that helps with efficiency and productivity massively. We've also got in the family team a family WhatsApp. So any questions arise, whether it be legal or whether it be to do with court hearings, how to access documents remotely, all of those going up on the WhatsApp group is hugely helpful. We also have kind of on the social side, which is nice. Obviously, we've all lost that. We've all lost that as a profession and actually worldwide. We have weekly quizzes, which are run by Mark Friedman, one of the family partners. He does those every week to kind of set up. They're a lunchtime quiz, which allows us to take half an hour away from our work. And yeah, so there's lots of different things that have been put in place. Being asked how we are by management, and
Yeah, it's a small thing, but it matters a lot, doesn't it?
No, it really does. And actually, we have a weekly Zoom meeting as well in the family department. And the other day, one of the partners actually said, before we were talking about what we've been doing this week and whether we've got capacity and kind of work at the moment, she just said, actually, how are you? You just go around and just see how you are. And I mean, I'll be the first that I've had a couple of wobblies, just thinking when it's going to end and when we're going to get to reality. But it's just nice to know that we're asked whether we're okay, having the reassurance that they're there, not just professionally, but if we just want to have a chat, if we just want to have a vent, and it's okay to have a bit of a wobbly or to not feel okay, and that's what Osborne's well, and that's not just for the family team. I know that other departments have also felt that as well.
If you had to pick your sort of top 3 tips for other trainees working in this area or trainees elsewhere on surviving lockdown, on thriving in lockdown, what would your top 3 be?
Okay, so surviving. Okay, I'm going to think about this. Keep reading in on stuff. Probably my boring stuff. Keep reading in on stuff so you're kept in the loop. What I have found, I'm a big learner, like Lucy was saying earlier, I learned through osmosis, so having people around has been of huge benefit, but we don't have that luxury in lockdown. So reading in when blogs, when guidance is being circulated, that's really important. That's what's personally helping me an awful lot. Get out, go for a walk, do some exercise, clear your head. That's really, really important. It could take you time. And also, I would say try to work your hours. One thing that I really found hard at the start, and sometimes still now, because you know the work's very active and you sometimes do work long hours. But I struggled to have a kind of work start time. So I would get out of bed, I was in my pajamas, I would switch on the computer. I only meant to just switch it on, just let it load. I found myself at 6:45 or 7 o'clock in the morning at my desk, hadn't even brushed my teeth. And then before I know it, my partner walked into the room and, you know, 11:30 saying, have you stopped working? Are you going to stop to breathe? But, oh yeah, you know, I haven't cleaned my teeth, haven't done anything. So just try to give yourself a bit of a cut-off time. We need to look after ourselves, we need to look after our health, and we need to strike a balance between the work life and the home life.
Yeah, I think there's probably a million family lawyers watching this who collectively eye rolled when we told them to stop working. I was like, yeah. We're pretty bad at taking care of our own well-being, let alone advising other people about it.
It's very true.
All right, I'm going to let you enjoy your Monday evening, tend to your wrist. How have you managed that anyway?
It's been tricky. I was actually on annual leave on Thursday and Monday. It was the first day annual leave I'd had for Christmas. And it was on Thursday about midday, a wall in my garden on top of me and so yeah, not great. But today I was also on annual leave. So I've been having my arm in the air, rest eyes, compression elevation, and I get more. I'll find out more about it on Wednesday when I go back to the hospital. So we'll see.
Well, for the rest of the evening, go watch Killing Eve, go get a G&T.
Exactly.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in this week. And as I said earlier, this will be on Instagram stories for another 24 hours in case you missed either Lucy earlier or any part of Jess's now. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Jess and Lucy.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care.